from MarkZ.
Oh, that's cringe.
Great.
All right, let's start the week 2 recap by just addressing the elephant in the room. Weird day.
Yeah.
That was a really weird day.
Yeah.
Well, the stomping games, but more importantly, the fact that none of them played in studio today.
Yeah.
If you're watching this like on VOD or something, you might not have known that there was a big audio issue that led to an hour delay into everyone having to go back and play from home.
Which must be really weird for the player. I mean, it is weird for the players because you have a big audio boom. You come to the studio. I'm sure a lot of them get makeup done and they're in the whole, like I mentioned it much earlier on in the day, like everyone going through their routine. Blabraz typically has his music in and just vibing. And then, guys, we got to head back. You're like, okay.
Yeah, we were saying, like, it's an easy excuse for C9, but the game might have been closer between them and FlyQuest had they played in studio. But it might not have been as well. Right? There's no way of really knowing. I would say if teams had known weeks ago that they were just going to be playing from home, I think they might have actually played better. This is maybe like the most hopium take. Game 4 and 5 today were ugly.
Yes.
Those were some really ugly games. Maybe 2 of the lowest quality games we've seen this year from North America. I think it would have been, I think they just would have been sharper if they were in the studio.
Yeah, I don't know about the last few games, but I know for certain the first game that impacted the players the most. I know you at the very top of the show, Mark, you talked about the element of like just being in a more comfortable environment since you're back in your facility that you've been scrimming the entire, like, you know, early split, but also if you're a returning player, last split too. But like, that's true, but routines matter so much for players. There are players that are like, oh, I forgot my coffee, so I just played like,
well, even stuff like that, like Palafox did an interview with Travis.
Yeah.
He was talking about how like, oh, in scrims, we kind of run it on some plays that like, oh, we just wouldn't do that on stage. But then you go back to your comfortable environment, and they just lost this game, and like, I'm not excusing it, but like, we had 3 huge stomps and then 2 super messy games. And I feel like that kind of correlates pretty directly to the fact that it was a curveball of a day.
By contrast, maybe it can take some pressure off because for IMT, for example, we finally saw them look, I mean, it was still a really rough game, but we did see a little bit more cohesion from them as a team.
I definitely would have expected them to grow. I didn't expect them to necessarily take this win at all. But knowing how it was really close versus TSM, that they had a huge winning angle, like they were just ahead of the game early on and then just made 2 critical mistakes that threw that for them, I was like, they have to get better. But I had to check myself because I said the same damn thing last year with the IMT. And I was like, guys, they're getting better. They're just in winning positions. They're just about to end and they throw it all away. So I was like, I should check my opinions on that. But finally, they take the win. It was not easy. It meant that there was a bit of a barren throw.
Oh, my God.
That was rough.
Play. Kenvi, Kindred ulting on the Baron, and then smiting the Baron before his own Kindred ult expires. Just like, but then they won, so no one didn't happen.
You know what?
Fine.
You get the dub. You just never VOD review that game. You have those sometimes where you walk away from the game, you go, we got the win. Let's never do that
Men
again.
In Black just flash
Forget that happened. Let's get Korean barbecue. All
that
right.
would legitimately be a game that I actually wouldn't ever want to bring up again. Like if I was Immortals.
We had a game with Curse where we had an 80-minute loss to Complexity, if people remember that. It was for a period of time the longest game in LCS history. We didn't really VOD review it, but we did rewatch the ending at some point. Just like laugh at ourselves, you know, like just to like get over it, have a good time. Speaking of some of these surprises that happened this week, what was the biggest 180 that you can think of? There were a couple 2-0 teams that started dropping some games, some 0-2 teams like Team Liquid that went 2-0. What's the biggest turnaround?
I'm going to go with a positive one because I'm sure there'll be plenty of negative ones to come. But I really liked what I saw from EG this week, actually. I think that Evil Geniuses, when we found out the changes they were making, we were like, okay, why would they pick up these players? Specifically, I'm thinking FBI because they wanted an AD carry, and I think they wanted someone who is, or they needed an AD carry rather, and they wanted someone who's a little bit more lane dominant. I think he slots right into this team. And not only that, but with the way the meta is right now, it's actually really important to have a bot lane that can either absorb pressure and lose gracefully enough that if they're on something like a Zeri where they're not automatically getting pushed super early, that they can bounce back and win team fights, or they can go toe-to-toe in that 2v2 with like really, really hard pushing bot lanes. And I think it fits in really well. And we finally saw that this week, where week 1 was, I mean, their players talked about it, but it was pretty shaky for them both games.
Yeah, they lost the COG game, and they kind of, I feel like their early games have been good the whole year, though, because their very first game they played in week 1, they won early game through mid game, won the game.
Yeah.
Against COG, they won early game through mid game, through late game.
Yeah.
And then finally they had like a really, their most solid victory was against Dignitas today, so.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because that's where I feel like people were like, well, Impact was the talker and missing him. Like now they're just going to keep throwing mid games and late games. But I think you saw the team, and like talking to FBI, he said it was super easy to just come onto this team because the core was already so good. So yeah, I don't know. It's cool to see. It's one of the reasons why I put EG so high preseason.
I put him number 1.
Same.
You're crazy.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
What? Really? You guys are both EG number 1?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were.
Oh, you guys are crazy. Okay.
They're currently not number 1, but they will be.
At some point.
Well, there's a lot of 3-1 teams now. I'm sure we'll get to the standings later. But for me, biggest turnaround I'd say was Team Liquid. That last game was
Technically correct.
technically it's a 0-2 to a 2-0.
You did win both.
You
All
cannot
right.
get a bigger turnaround than no wins to 2 wins.
Correct.
So yeah, I'll go with the technicality. Even though that fourth game looked exactly like last week's games, where they're just all over the place, disjointed.
I will also use a technicality. Not even technicality, just like it's a stat piece, which is TSM. From, 2-0, 0-2. Like, I thought even in their 2-0, specifically versus, I already said IMT, like, they didn't really perform well early game. But they still won those games, and now they're kind of starting to slip. So I would just say that team is a good example.
That's why I'd argue that's not 180 because
But by the numbers,
You guys,
We're working with
the
technicality.
play style is very similar.
you gave me too much time to think about it, and I overthought it.
Oh.
uh-oh.
The biggest 180 was last week I said it was the LCS Golden Age. Because C9, COG, and TSM were all at the top of the standings. They went 1-5. 6-0 to 1-5.
You tracked
I
it.
think that's a bigger 180 than 0-2 to 2-0.
So you combine 3 different teams together for
Yes.
your.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
All right, we'll take it.
Well, we have it.
One thing that
That
did
works.
change: FlyQuest undefeated now 4-0. You have $10,000.
Okay.
FlyQuest
Wow.
to the field.
Thank
Thanks.
you. I'll take the 10,000.
No, you have to bet.
Yeah,
it.
can I just pop
It's
it?
play money. Monopoly
I'm
money.
keeping the money.
Monopoly money.
Yeah, field.
Field.
What?
Yeah, the field.
Wait, what?
You
always
just said
take
you
the
have
field.
EG as the best team.
Yeah,
I'm
what?
also
So
a
already-
flip-flopper. So, I'm taking. So, actually, no. I can't. I'm so close.
And those
to
are
it.
shoes.
I
But
was
they're
ready for
close to
Raz to just
flip-flop.
launch
They're so
his
easy to
shoe
put on,
across
even though I'm
the room
struggling.
again.
The reason why it's so enticing is because when you see their first game of the day, they just stomp them.
They are so good.
They stomped
so good.
Cloud9. It's insane how well Vikkel played alongside Spica. The one question I had was how that 2v2 would play out with that duo.
Mhm.
And they look insane.
Yeah.
And we didn't have really many questions about Prince. Prince is performing like really, really well.
They beat C9
Yep.
with a moo-moo. Like they just played a moo-moo.
But Amumu's a great pick. So what
and
are you
it was
trying to say?
fine. It's not.
I'm so
I
close to
disagree.
picking FlyQuest, but I'll take the field.
I mean, it just speaks to the fact that, like, Spica knows his role in that team. It's like,
Yeah.
I have 2 legitimate superstars around me. I am here to front line and set them up. I'm taking Fly. I put him number 1. I'm all in on Fly.
I always take the field. Like
right?
mathematically, you take the field.
Don't you always
So-
take? I feel like you never take the
No,
field.
see, here's an example you don't. Azale offered me this bet one time, and
Yeah.
it was C9, and it was like week 2, week 3 kind of thing, and I was like, C9 wins the whole thing, and he's like, no, I'm taking the field. You're crazy. This is a dumb bet. I
Yep.
won that bet.
Was it
What
in-
year was this?
Don't remember, 2021?
Oh, this was when
Was
they
it
were
last
giga
This is when they were
Oh.
stomping and
Yeah.
spraying.
Oh, so
a
this
couple-
is okay. The 2020
Spring.
spring C9
Yeah. I think
was
it was
one of the
Oh,
most
okay.
dominant LCS
Yeah.
teams ever. Them versus this FlyQuest. What's your
Ooh.
aggregate ranking?
Ooh, I mean, it's got to be pretty
Well-
close, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
so
only-
you're-
I think I made that bet around week 3, so I'd seen another. I think they were like 6-0, or something.
Okay, so 16-2, 17-1. What's your FlyQuest
Yeah,
record?
they even haven't been close to losing a game yet. They've
They
never
have
even been in
not.
a losing position.
Yeah.
They haven't played that many games.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's 4 games,
And they
but
only got
0
14
losing
left.
positions.
Yeah, that's true.
Have they been first blooded yet? I don't even know. Gory first blooded.
Yeah, they did against Golden Guardians, and that
closest.
weirdly looked almost like they're shaky.
Are you on 18-0 watch? Is that how confident you are?
Uh-oh.
I'm
You
not
gonna
gonna-
bet on it? You're gonna bet money?
Yeah.
I'm a sane and reasonable person. Okay.
$10,000 handshake?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. 17-1, and they win the championship. Just, I'll be safe, all right?
Yeah, I mean, that's that's now something I want to start tracking because I thought that C9 team was like probably the best LCS team in history. It's the cursed MSI that never happened because COVID.
Yeah.
So we never got to see the full manifestation of that team. Even in Summer Split, they were still winning all their scrims as they imploded on stage. So it's like you never got to see that team. And I wonder if that's FlyQuest.
They never pick Yumi GP.
There also might have been some details wrong. I don't remember exactly when I made this bet with Isaiah.
It was probably that.
It was probably that. Yeah. Anyways, moving on ahead. Your MasterCard Player of the Week is